Welcome to the May the 5th, 1986 taping of It Happened in Grand Prairie. And we're going to be bringing back memories from old Grand Prairie. And this is our tape number 15, and we are so very excited to have a longtime resident of Grand Prairie who has just recently moved away, but we had to bring her back because of her knowledge of Grand Prairie, Texas, and some of the important people that lived here during that time. Lola Mae Swadley, welcome to It Happened in Grand Prairie.
Thank you.
We're just so delighted to have you, Lola Mae, and we really would like for you to look out into your camera and possibly tell a little bit about yourself personally, first of all, about your heritage, why you were in Grand Prairie, how your parents got here, and possibly a little bit about yourself before we go into the Swadleys that you married into that wonderful family. Would you do that about yourself personally?
Would you like for me to start with my forefathers?
That would be fine.
Well, my grandmother and grandfather on my father's side were, my grandmother was German and my grandfather was English. My grandmother was Orpha Darwin, and Orpha Darwin made this quilt during the Civil War between 1860 and 1864, because she married in 1865 when her sweetheart came back from the war.
Wonderful.
He fought at Vicksburg and several other places, was wounded, and was finally declared unfit for service and went home and
All
married.
right, what was his name?
Wright Miller.
Wright Miller was her husband.
Yes.
All right. Now,
and my father was the fourth child in that union and the only boy. And he was born in 1871, and they came to Texas in 1872.
What was his name?
My father was Lawrence Milo Miller.
All right. Keep on talking.
And my mother was Minnie Baker Good.
All right.
And
Where did they meet?
My grandfather Good fought with Morgan's Raiders, which was sort of questionable. And he was captured with the Raiders. Some say in Chicago, but I believe history says Indiana, Indianapolis. After the war, he was from Tennessee, and after the war, he wandered west enough that he got into Polo, Missouri. And there he stopped to make some money so he could go on, and he never left because he found Sarah Baker and married her.
And from that union came?
From my union?
No, from Sarah and...
Well, there were 5 children.
There were 5 children?
Yes, and my mother was the third one of those.
And give me your mother's full maiden name and...
Actually her name was Araminda, but she always went by the name of Minnie Good.
Minnie Good.
Yes. And she married Lawrence Milo Miller. There were 5 children in that union, and they came to Texas in 1872.
All right. Where did they settle in Texas?
Well, now, that's interesting. My grandfather and his 2 brothers-in-law came to Texas and bought up a considerable tract of land near Cooper, Texas. And then he went back, and the 2 brothers-in-law more or less chickened out. They didn't come. But grandfather moved his family here. He had 4 children at that time. And he moved his family here, and the nearest railroad was in Honey Grove. And they brought their things to Honey Grove and rode a buckboard to Cooper, and they lived in near Cooper, Texas. There were no banks, and he kept his money. They had just a box house, and you know what that is. You know, the frame stands out from the wall. He kept his money in quart jars up above the doors, and it was all silver. And the baby child used those jars of money as her playthings. I think that's interesting.
Very, very interesting. All right, now your father was down near Cooper, Texas. How did you come into Grand Prairie, Texas, young lady?
Well, it was an accident, actually.
All right.
I had a cousin who was associate professor of history in SMU.
All right.
And I went back, I graduated from SMU, and I went back to SMU after my mother's death to visit my roommate. And I met my cousin in the hall, and he said, there's a school in Grand Prairie, and I want you to go out there and apply for it. And I said, no, I don't want it. But he persuaded me to, and I came out, and there were 29 applicants. So the superintendent told me I would have to stay and meet the board, and I said, no way. But I got the school.
You got the school. What year did you graduate from SMU?
In 1927.
In 1927?
Yes.
And where did you complete your high school education?
At Cooper.
At Cooper, Texas.
Yes.
From Cooper, Texas on into SMU.
Yes.
And in 1927 you became a graduate, and then subsequently, a few years later, coming back to visit.
I went home to stay with Mother. She was very ill. And I went home to stay with her. And after she passed away, then I have told you how I happened to be here.
All right. Now,
and then my fate was sealed. I never got away, and I'm happy.
Wonderful. Now, you got to Grand Prairie, Texas, and you did get the job. What was your area of teaching, and where did you teach? And name us some of the superintendent or the principal or some teachers.
Well, I taught in high school.
In high school?
It was the old high school building. Everything from first grade through the 11th grade was there, and I taught sophomore, junior, and senior English in the high school. There were 19 teachers, I believe, at that time.
What year was this now, 27 or 28?
No, it was the latter part of 29.
The latter part of 29.
And then on 30. The first lunchroom in that building was established by Mrs. May Smith and Mrs. Lida Small. And Mrs. Smith's house was near, and they cooked the food over there, and they served hot dogs and chili, and they served it from a little table underneath the stairway in the back of the building.
All right. Now, before that, was there not a little lunch place outside on the west portion?
Later.
That was later.
Yes, this was the first one. Later, then there was a lunch room built outside, and then when they remodeled, they had a lunchroom
upstairs.
Upstairs in the building.
All right. Now, who was the superintendent or the principal when you came to work at Grand Prairie?
Well, actually, he was sort of an interim. The first real superintendent was Mr. Gentry, C.B. Gentry.
All right.
And he stayed. Well, I guess he was still here when I left. He was only. After I married, I quit and was away a while, and then I went back.
All right. Tell me how many years you taught in the Grand Prairie school system, discounting the portion when you left for a while.
I taught 24 and a half years in Grand Prairie.
And all of it in the English department?
No.
No. Tell me the other departments you taught in.
Well, when I went back, I was more or less drafted to a first grade situation.
All right.
And Mr. L.A. Roberts was the county superintendent, and I went in to substitute until they could get a teacher, and he wouldn't let me leave. So I got my primary hours, and I continued. It was a great challenge, and I found I could use my English so well with those little first grade children.
All right. Now, in this teaching situation, the first time, where did you meet Mr. John Samuel Swadley?
Well, one evening, a lot of friends would come by, and one evening a friend came by with a strange young man in the car and introduced me, and the strange young man was pretty regular on my doorstep from then on, and that was John Swadley, Buddy. He was known as Buddy.
He was known as Buddy Swadley.
Yes.
And he was of the Swadley family. Say that Uncle Jake was Uncle Jake related to him?
His father was Floyd.
I see.
And Uncle Jake was his father's brother.
I see. Wonderful. So they were all related.
Now, those people came from Virginia.
A different strain of Swadleys then?
No, Uncle Jake and all of them
came from Virginia.
And Granddad all came from Virginia.
Wonderful.
But of course, a good many of them were born in Texas.
All right. And did you and Mr. John have any wonderful children that you could talk about?
We have two children, or we had two children. I have a beautiful, lovely daughter who lives in Richardson.
All right. Let's give her a name. Her
name is Harolyn, H-A-R-O-L-Y-N, Harolyn Ezell, E-Z-E-L-L. And I had a son, John Lawrence Swadley, and he was killed in an automobile accident in 1973 at the age of 27.
That was a terrific loss for you.
Yes, it was.
All right. Now,
but we live over those things.
Yes, we do. And Lola Mae, where did you and John live here in Grand Prairie, Texas?
Well, when we got married, it was against the rules to elect a married teacher.
Oh, it was?
Yes. So my superintendent we were going to marry when school was out, so my superintendent had me to keep it very quiet. And in order for us to have a place to live, he and his wife were going to Denton to school that summer. So he moved his furniture into 2 rooms and subleased his house to us through that summer so that we'd have a place to live until we found something else.
All right.
And then we moved up the street. That was on College, in the old Dr. Shanks home.
All right.
Then we moved on up the street in another house, and a year later we bought a house on what is now Southwest 3rd, and was where the Presbyterian Educational Building is now.
All right. Now, I'd like for you to tell us a little bit about the Swadley family. They were so important, and especially the part of the Swadley family that you married into, relating to maybe the first well that was in Grand Prairie, Texas, the beautiful home on North Street that is now owned by the Thates.
Yes.
Will you tell us a little bit about that, please?
Well, the well that you referred to, as far as we can determine, was drilled on the property of Granddad Jacob Swadley Sr. And it's the property that now has the First Baptist Family Building, I believe, on it. And as far as we can tell, that's the very first productive well of any size. I do not know whether it's artesian or not, but it supplied water for several families. He sold water out of that well to families.
He was an enterprising businessman,
yes,
wasn't
he was. He had to be. He had 9 children. He had 6 boys and 3 girls.
All right, now tell us about the Thate home that is now located on North Street that has always been known as the Swadley home.
Yes, well, that is not the original Swadley home. It burned in 1909.
All right.
And my husband was 3 at the time. And during the winter of 1909, 1910, that house was built. And it shows the skilled workmanship that my father-in-law had for woodworking in the trim around the house, you know.
And that was John Floyd Swadley, was the one that was so capable as far as woodworking, and
yes, he was commonly known as Floyd. I have a table here that he made that I'd like to show you, if I may.
All right, let's see the beautiful table, the inlaid table. Just pull it right over by you, thanks.
What is so interesting about this is the way he did it. He did not know any algebra or geometry or anything to help him to figure angles. But he would cut strips of wood of each of these colors and shape them, now long strips, mind you, shaped in the shape of these. And then he would start and glue them together and in a vise. Now that made a strip this long. And then when he had finished, he would saw a slab off, put it on the tabletop, and it was there.
That's so exciting.
Well, it's exciting to me because on occasion he would call me and he'd say, I've got to have some help with geometry or with math, and I'd go over and help him.
And I believe he called you Sunshine?
Yes.
Wonderful.
There's a story behind that.
All right. Now, underneath that, there is a coverlet that we'd like for you to talk about just a little bit.
Well, this came from my side of the family.
All right.
And I don't have any idea how old this is. It was a coverlet they raised the sheep and
carded the wood.
Washed it first. Have you ever washed wool? It's terrible.
Terrible.
They carded it, dyed it, spun it, wove it, and looked at the colors in it.
And they have stayed over all of these years.
Now the reason it is not complete, my father had a prize horse, and he did not realize the value of this, and he did realize the value of his horse, so he used this for a saddle blanket.
Well, that is wonderful, and this was your father's saddle blanket, so that has a historical meaning to you,
Well, it was much more important than something else.
This is another piece of memorabilia we must ask you about. It is lovely, lovely embroidered. And tell us about this.
Well, at the time this was made, ladies who were carrying children who were pregnant were not seen on the street.
Not out in public?
Not out in public. And my aunt, my mother's sister.
What was her name?
Una Pauline Hooten.
Wonderful.
And I was flower girl in her wedding. And then the winter she carried her child, that was in 1913, she did this.
Is this embroidered?
This is embroidered, and it's all padded. There is
I noticed that.
It's padded and raised.
It seemed embossed, doesn't it?
It does. Well, and see the hems, all hand hem stitched.
I believe you have plans for this for a museum in East Texas?
In Cooper.
In Cooper, Texas.
Yes, to honor the
that side of your family.
And this and that quilt belong on both sides of my family.
Right. Why don't we put this aside and let's talk about this quilt just a little bit more, Lola Mae. I noticed with a great deal of interest you told us about the date. Give us that date one more time.
This quilt was made during the Civil War. All sorts of materials were not available, and you notice there's a great deal of just plain white in it, but she has used the...
were these hand-dyed?
I'm sure they were, but I don't know. I can't say. But I would like you to notice the intricate pattern that she in the quilting, and each one of these raised pieces is stuffed individually. They tell me they had a needle and they took the cotton and stuffed each raised, and you notice the quilting in between is almost solid.
Just almost
now
solid.
she did this while her sweetheart was in the service. He was declared unfit for service and came back, and they married in 1865.
All right, now how did you come into possession of this? Now, someone must have handed this down to a very special lady.
Yes, this woman died when my father was 7 years old. That would make it, she died in 1878. And my earliest recollection of this quilt was that my mother, who would have been her mother-in-law, her daughter-in-law, prized this quilt and kept it in a special closet. And we were not ever allowed to use it. We could look at it all we want to. But that has meant so much to me as I've grown older, because she never knew the woman, and yet she prized this possession because it belonged to her husband's mother, and she died when he was so little that Mother treasured this quilt above everything.
Now, we'd like to thank you for bringing this memorabilia, but we want to pick your mind just a little bit, Lola Mae, in the little bit of time that we may have left. Tell us a little bit about your association as a Grand Prairie citizen during the times when you were teaching school. What did you all do for activities? How was church, and where did you go? What were your hobbies during that time?
You know, Grand Prairie was small.
Yes.
And teachers and high school students did things together. We were always coaching a play, or we were having adults come in and have a play. Then there was a meeting place downtown, the old Luton's sandwich shop.
All right.
And everybody met there. Teachers, high school students, everybody alike. I don't know, the time just passed happily. Everybody knew everybody else, and everybody was so sweet and so kind to newcomers.
I remember something that you told me in an interview a year or so ago, when we were discussing the old Anderson building that is located in Grand Prairie. And at that time, it was called the city of Dalworth Park.
Oh, yes.
And this old building that's called the Anderson Building was originally built as an apartment complex, and also as a educational building where you could go and take, it was a business college. And then after it became a business college, I think that it filtered down and it finally became a nightclub restaurant.
Well, I really don't know the background you're talking about. All I know is
the Rainbow Gardens. All right, it finally became the Rainbow Gardens.
I assumed it had been built for Rainbow Gardens.
No, it was not built originally for that.
But
tell us your experience with the Rainbow Gardens.
All right.
Okay.
We always had a junior-senior banquet. There was no place to have one, so the mothers cooked the food and took it. First, we went down to the one on the east side, you know, that was torn down. That had
the Baghdad.
Baghdad.
The Baghdad Club.
Yes, the first one we went to was there after I came, but the next one was at Rainbow Gardens. And so the children danced. Well, I didn't know there was anything wrong with children dancing. And I almost lost my job, I guess, over that because I let the children dance, and I was the sponsor.
You were the sponsor
Yes.
of the senior class that year?
Yes.
Were you ever the sponsor of the senior class before that or after that?
No, the senior class usually chose a different sponsor each year, and I was only here 4.5 years at a time. I don't know whether they would have let me or not.
Could you, by any chance, recall the year that that took place, the year that you were the senior class sponsor? Is that asking you to go back a little too far?
Spring of 1932.
Spring of 32, wonderful. We need to interview someone from the class of 1932 to see how they enjoyed that trip to the Rainbow Gardens.
Elizabeth Webb's mother was one of the main ones that helped to prepare that.
All right, are there some other names that you'd like to drop that were in the class at that time?
Plenty, but I don't know whether they live here anymore or not, but I do know Elizabeth lives here.
Elizabeth McElhaney Webb, and it was her mother that was involved in that.
Yes,
was
very
Elizabeth
much
in the class by any chance? Oh, well, great, then. We have a good pinpoint pivot there that we can talk with her. All right. Another thing we'd like for you to talk a little bit about was your association with the other teachers. Now that you're married, how did you finally get accepted by the school system, or did you have to quit teaching completely?
Oh, no, I was already elected. None of the teachers objected. It was just that the school board...
A policy.
Well, because of the Depression, you know, see, that I married in 1931, and that was the deepest part of the Depression. And they didn't think that, they thought a man should have the job or a single woman who had to make a living.
I see.
See? And then the next year, that year I got my salary, but the next year I got vouchers. I didn't get a single salary. All year I got vouchers.
And then when you got these vouchers, could you redeem those at the grocery store and et cetera?
Harity Furniture Company advertised that they would redeem them. You could redeem them at a discount at the bank, but Harity Furniture Company said they would redeem them at full value. And so we bought our second bedroom suite
with vouchers. That is wonderful. All right, now, Lola Mae, of all of the times that you lived in Grand Prairie, what do you feel was the most significant thing that changed the face of Grand Prairie, Texas?
The coming of North America.
The coming of North American aviation.
Yes.
Well, were you working as a school teacher at that time?
No, not at that particular time. My daughter was just 2.
Now, tell us a little bit about your daughter and son going into school. When they went to school, who were their teachers and where did they attend?
Well, John, they both attended Austin Elementary School.
All right. That's after the building, after the war and the building of the new Austin School.
They both attended Lee Junior High School, and they both attended Grand Prairie High School, and John went into the service and was in the service for a period, and then he came out and he became a glazier. And he had been working in Oklahoma City and had become ill and had come home to recuperate, and this accident happened. It was not his fault, but he's gone just the same. Yes. And my daughter lives in Richardson. She and her husband do not have any children. She works for Sun Production Company. And
all right, now during the time when your children were in school, were you in the PTA or what did you do during that time?
Oh my, yes.
Did you belong to any clubs? Or what was the going thing for clubs?
I was a charter member of the Grand Prairie Study Club.
All right.
And I'm a past president of that.
All right.
And I was, if not the first, one of the very first presidents of the Garden Club.
Oh, the Grand Prairie Garden Club.
The Grand Prairie Club, the old Grand Prairie Garden Club.
The one that I will be president of next year. Isn't that exciting?
Yes. Oh. And at that point in time, there were old wrecked cars and junk in every ditch in the town. And that garden club was instrumental in cleaning up all of that. The city furnished a truck, and we furnished the talk and so on, and got that cleaned up.
Well, who do you remember as some of the outstanding citizens during the time after you came as a teacher and during the 1940s? Who were some of the people that impressed you, both the men and the women?
Well, there were so many. There's one thing that stands out in my mind. The Methodist Church almost lost their building soon after I came here because they did not have the money to pay for it.
All right.
And there were 12 men who went on that note, signed it personally, assumed 1/12 of the debt.
How marvelous.
And those men, to me, are outstanding.
Are there any left in Grand Prairie at this time?
No, as far as I know, Mrs. L.O. Turner is the only widow that's left.
I see.
Her husband was one of
the 12.
Yes, and I'm sure she wouldn't mind my telling this, that they almost lost their business in paying for that. It was so hard for them to pay for that, their part of that, and the business too, and I admire them a great deal.
All right. And some of the others, I know that you knew Mayor G.H. Turner, that was our mayor for about 26 years.
Yes, and I knew Harry when he didn't have anything. You know, during the Depression, he was just like everybody else. But he was a very astute businessman, and when North American came, he had bought the option on some property, and he just kept working with it.
How about Main Street downtown? We have about a minute and a half left. Tell us the Main Street when you came here and how it has changed.
All right. Well, Main Street started when you come under the underpass, you know. But up to that point, coming west, it was not the same. But you come on through, and of course it wound around considerably. And as you get up past M Bank, at the end of that street was Anderson Motor Company, an automobile agency. It had a great big plate glass window. And these cars would come up the street, and they didn't know there was a building there. They'd just go right through. See, they'd think it was oncoming lights, and they'd go right through that. Then that went around to what is now Pacific Street. And on out of town.
On out of town. Well, that's very exciting. In the downtown area, we have about a half-minute left. Where did you go to the beauty shop? You must have gone to the beauty shop.
Oh, yes.
Tell us about that.
Izora Graham.
Oh, wonderful.
Izora, then Irene, then Billy Mack, did my hair for a period of 20-odd years.
Wonderful. Lola Mae, it has just been wonderful having you on this show. Will you believe that our 30 minutes are gone?
No, I can't.
Oh, it has just been delightful. Thank you for bringing the memorabilia. Thanks for the memories you brought to us. And as a past school teacher of Grand Prairie, Texas, we're just so delighted to have had you on the show today. And this is Ruthie Jackson reminding you that history is as we live and do.